Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com with Mildred, the camera shy Mildred. I am so excited that she's agreed to join us. She's actually a very, very good cat, but she's very nervous. She gets kind of skittish easily, and she doesn't like to be picked up at all unless she's on the same level that you are. See, she has her attitude, and there she goes probably. But, well, there we go. She made a cameo, and I am just thrilled beyond belief because some of you have questioned whether or not she even existed. And there she is. She does indeed. She is Finster's sister. She's a short hair. Finster is a medium hair. So they look somewhat similar, but actually the better you get to know them, the more different they appear. So what are we here to talk about? I don't care. Mildred showed up. I'm so thrilled. Here we go. Yes, this box. Jean-Pierre Rampal's famous flute concertos. Oh my. Yes, lots of them. Well, there's 12 discs of them, and you've got all kinds of nifty goodies here. Let's see what we have, shall we? I mean, what is there to say about it? I mean, Rampal is Rampal, right? Possibly the greatest flutist of the 20th century. Some might say James Galway, but I've always been a fan of the French crew, you know? So, index of works. Wow. Look at all this stuff. Maybe we should just go through the index of works. Don't you think? I think we should, because it'll be quicker and it'll give you a better sense of it. There's just an amazing amount of stuff in here. Really. First, Paul Arma. When was the last time you took out your Paul Arma CDs? He lived from 1905 to 1987, and he wrote a Divertimento de Concert #1 for flute and string orchestra. Charming little work on CD 7. Then we've got C.P.E. Bach, Concerto for Flute, Strings, and Continuo in B flat. And then we've got Bach. What have we got by Bach? We've got the Brandenburg Concertos 2, 4, and 5. And then the Flute Concertos in A minor, E minor, and G minor. What? You didn't know that Bach wrote flute concertos, did you? Well, he didn't. They were all originally violin concertos, although one of them was reconstructed after BWV 1059 and 35, and the other two were violin. One is for violin. The A minor was for violin originally, and the F minor for harpsichord inspired the flute concerto in G minor. So there you go, Bach's flute concertos. And you've got the concerto for flute, harpsichord, and violin, better known as the triple concerto, BWV 1044, and the orchestral suite number 2 that has the fabulous flute solo. What's that? The Badinerie, whatever that thing is called. And then the Sinfonia in B minor from the cantata BWV 209, Non Sacche Sia Dolore, one of the Italian cantatas. Yeah, the only Italian cantata. Well, there's not many. Then we have Michel Blavet from 1700 to 1768 is when he was around, and we have got a concerto for flute, strings, and continuo, originally for 2 violins and continuo. You see, there really isn't a lot of great flute repertoire. There is tons of flute repertoire. But really interesting flute repertoire, well, let's face it, not so much. And so it's a helpful thing to transcribe works written for other instruments for the flute. They're always a little bit less interesting when transcribed for the flute, because the flute is a vastly less expressive instrument than, say, the violin, with a rather different range. But hey, you know, flutists or flautists or whatever you want to call them, they need something to do. Let's see, Joseph Baudin de Boismortier. Boismortier was a good composer. He really was. Concerto for 5 flutes without bass, Opus 15, number 4, and Opus 15, number 6. You get 2 of them. Concerto for 5 flutes. I mean, can you imagine? It's like you think Bach for 3 harpsichords is weird sounding? Try Boismortier for 5 flutes. Michel Corrette, Concerto for Flute, Strings, and Continuo, originally for flute, 2 violins, and continuo. See, these were recorded in the days when, original instruments were like not a thing yet. And so we had to diddle the music to make it acceptable to modern ears. And that's fine with me. It is more acceptable, often as not. Francois de Vienne, Flute Concerto number 7. He wrote a bunch of them. Franz and Karl Doppler, Fantasy for 2 flutes and orchestra on themes from Verdi's Rigoletto. Well, that's fun. Then we have Christian Ludwig Dieter, Concerto Concertant number 3 for 2 flutes and orchestra. See, Rampal did a lot of interesting flute music. The original music for flute and the transcriptions. I mean, he's always trying to make it interesting. And he found a lot of unknown music or lesser known music to do with this stuff. Then you've got Gluck, the Dance of the Blessed Spirits for flute and strings, of course. Handel, Concerto for Flute, Strings, and Continuo in F major, Opus 4, number 5. And the Concerto Grosso for Flute, Violin, Strings, and Continuo, Opus 3, number 3. Concerto, Opus 4, number 5? Isn't that like an organ concerto? Who cares? Haydn, Concerto in C major, originally for violin, just the Andante. Hoffmann, Leopold, Concerto for Flute and Strings, previously attributed to Haydn, but it's not. Honegger, Concerto da Camera for Flute, English Horn, and Chamber Orchestra. Lovely work. Everyone should know that. Jacques Ibert's Flute Concerto, of course. Jolivet, the Flute Concerto for Flute and String Orchestra, and the Suite en Concert for Flute and Percussion, also known as Concerto number 2. That's cool. That's oodles of fun. You know, Lou Harrison did some cool stuff for flute and percussion, which unfortunately isn't in here. The French school, of course, was the school of flute playing. So there we go. Cacciatorian Flute Concerto, which is a transcription of his violin concerto. Leclerc, Concerto for Flute and Strings, Opus 7, number 3. Marcello, Concerto in C minor, originally for oboe, just the Adagio. It sounds rather nice on the flute, actually. Saverio Mercadante, Concerto number 2 for Flute and String Orchestra. Charming piece. Mercadante's Flute Concerti are lovely, lovely works. Then, of course, you've got Mozart, right? You've got Mozart's flute concertos, the Concerto for Flute and Harp, and the Andante for flute and orchestra, the Rondo for flute and orchestra, originally for violin. Mozart hated the flute. But if people paid him, he did it anyway. So that's why we have Mozart's music for flute, most of which is some of his lesser concerted works, but flutists, are in the beggars can't be choosers situation of having to deal with it. Jacques Christophe Naudot, he lived from 1690 to 1762 for flute, strings, and continuo. Again, originally for flute, 2 violins, and continuo. You get in the pattern here, where you've got these concerto grosso-like things. You could just add a few strings to the violin parts and make it a flute concerto alone. Good idea. Nielsen Flute Concerto, masterpiece. One of the great masterpieces for the instrument. Delightful and humorous and wonderful. The flute has a fight with the trombone towards the end. It's terrific. Karl Reinecke. Reinecke's Flute Concerto is also a very good work. Jean Riviere, who lived from 1896 to 1987. Concerto for Flute and Strings, another one of those lovely French things that you see over and over again. Karl Stamitz, Concerto for Flute and Orchestra, Opus 29. Finster. Is that Finster or is that Mildred? They're playing with their Mylar scrunchy toys. Tartini, Concertos for Flute, Strings, and Continuos, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. Okay, 4 of them. And they're all in G major. Well, one's in D major, so there you go. Telemann, Concerto for Flute, Strings, and Continuo, originally for recorder. No one's going to care. Concerto for Flute, Strings, and Continuo in D major. Telemann Werkverzeichnis 5-1, C1, 551, D1. Who knows what that means? And then you've got lots of Vivaldi. And I don't need to go into which Vivaldi. It's all the Vivaldi that you'll ever want to hear, including the piccolo concertos and La Tempesta di Mare and La Notte and Il Giardellino and some incomplete concertos. Just lots of Vivaldi flute concertos. So there you go. That's famous flute concertos. Now, the title, Famous Flute Concertos. Oh, really? Are they? One way or another, they are delightful and fun to listen to, so what the hell? And Rampal plays the living daylights out of them. Nothing not to like. Keep on listening, friends. Take care.